Welcome to another episode of the Constitutional Candidate Series. This week we're lucky enough to have a candidate, Bob Good from Virginia's 5th District. This is an R+6 district. And what the candidate series is about is, in the past, candidates typically when they're looking for support, and they're looking for contributions, or they're looking for endorsements from these organizations, they sit down behind closed doors in a private meeting and have a one-on-one vetting process. And that's a great thing. It worked in the past. Unfortunately, the problem is when you do that, candidates sometimes make promises and they don't keep them. And so, the donors and the activists who support the organization, whose money that it is that they're using to support these candidates, don't have the opportunity to chime in and ask what's important to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask a couple questions. We're going to vet Bob as a candidate. We've already pre-vetted him. We already think we like him. We just want to make sure that we do, and ask him.
Maybe we should stop now then.
Well, go ahead, Bob. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and why you're running?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity to be with you, and I appreciate it very much, Larry. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia. Grew up a wrestler, went on to wrestle at Liberty University there in Lynchburg. I was a finance major. I graduated from there. I would later go back and get an MBA. So my background as far as education is finance and business. Went to work for a division of Citigroup for 17 years and was a district manager in their lending division, and then came back to Liberty University 15 years ago to serve as the chief fundraiser for the athletics department. I was one of the senior associate ADs, executive director of what they call the Flames Club, the Flames being the Liberty mascot, and really had the chance to raise money for scholarships for young student athletes from all kinds of income backgrounds. I was from a lower middle class family, really a lower income family, and allow student athletes like myself to earn to compete in Division I athletics at a distinctly Christian university, earn an outstanding education. I got the chance to raise money for that over the last 15 years to provide those opportunities for others. I also served for 4 years on the Board of Supervisors in Campbell County, my home county here, where I live now, just outside Lynchburg. And so my background is, again, 17 years in financial services with Citi, 15 years in college athletics, raising money for the athletics program and for scholarships, facilities, and operations, and then also serving 4 years on the Board of Supervisors in Campbell County, just outside Lynchburg.
That's great. That's great. So what made you run for Congress?
Well, as you look at this election, and as we even could see it a year ago, here in Virginia, the Democrats took control of this General Assembly a year ago. And, you see what they're doing to our state here as they turn Virginia blue, and they're stripping away at so many of the things that are important to us as conservatives, as Republicans. And then you look at this race here nationally, and the choice couldn't be more clear. The different visions for America and where we want to take the country couldn't be more disparate between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And I feel strongly about the Judeo-Christian principles our nation was founded upon, the constitutional republic that we are, adhering to the Constitution. I support our president very much. And we had an opportunity to make this seat brighter red, if you will, and to put a true conservative in this seat. And so I was one of those looking for a conservative to represent us and trying to help find someone. And I was part of that group doing that, and ended up that group began to point the finger at me, and agreed to go ahead and jump into the nomination race. And we prevailed in that, and now we're ready to win the general election also.
That's terrific. And look, the Constitution is why we exist. Our PAC is a constitutional rights PAC. We fight for every single amendment in the Bill of Rights. I don't fight for the amendment like that established the IRS or the income tax, or the 17th Amendment. However, I do fight for every amendment in the Bill of Rights.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're about. So tell me how you stand on the Second Amendment.
There's just another example of how my opponent and I are polar opposites when it comes to the Constitution, it comes to the issues. I take the Constitution at its word. I believe in an originalist intent strict interpretation, and it says shall not be infringed. And that's where it ends with me. I don't believe in any compromise on the issue. I don't believe in any restrictions on the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. I believe it's a God-given right that is written into our Constitution. You know, James Madison said 200 years ago that, you know, America is unique among the nations of the world because we trust our citizens to be armed, unlike other countries. So it was radical when the founders recognized it 200 plus years ago. It was intended not just for sport and hunting, that's great, or not even just to defend ourselves, but to ensure that we remain a free people, that we remain a free nation. And so I don't believe in any restrictions on the law-abiding rights or the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. Sometimes I get asked, hey, do we need more laws? No, we just need to follow the Constitution. The highest law of the land says that that right shall not be infringed. And what we need to do is to challenge and to declare unconstitutional the laws that have been passed in Virginia and other states that restrict those. You know, Biden has said that if he wins, Beto O'Rourke will be in charge of gun policy. And my opponent, who already supports the gun restrictions that have been passed here in Virginia, would support those policies of the Biden-Harris administration, God forbid if that were to take place. I also have a record on this because during my time in Campbell County, you know, I helped make Campbell County one of the first sanctuary cities or counties rather in Virginia. After our General Assembly began to pass unconstitutional gun restrictions, we declared that we would not enforce those in our county. Our sheriff, who's a constitutional officer, came behind us and declared that. I've been at the gun, we've held 4 or 5 gun rallies ourselves in our campaign. I was at a large gun rally in Richmond, Virginia here just back in January with some 50,000 people. So we have lived that issue. I'm concealed carry myself, and my opponent is just the opposite.
Well, all of those things are spectacular. I appreciate you doing that. And just to be clear, for those who don't understand, the sanctuary city movement in Virginia is not an illegal immigration sanctuary city movement.
That's right.
And that's not what you support. You support sanctuary city for Second Amendment rights because Virginia has been, you know, clamping down on the Second Amendment.
Yeah, and it really put some tension between the local government, where the power is supposed to be, you know, the founders intended to have as much power at the local level where the people had the most influence, as we both know. But it was the local government saying, you know, the county supervisors like ours saying, we're not going to enforce unconstitutional gun restrictions in our county. And the sheriff came behind us and said the same thing. He would not enforce it. And then the General Assembly here in Virginia came after the sheriffs and took away their raises this year, because they were angry that the sheriffs, about 100 of them across Virginia, stood up and said, we're not going to enforce this in our counties because we're constitutional officers sworn to uphold the Constitution. And the Democrats in Virginia here said, we're not going to pass your raises this year, and we're coming after your benefits next because you're following the Constitution.
Oh, not only that, you know, in a lot of counties in Virginia, Loudoun County, which is where I live, you know, they're trying to get rid of the sheriff and replace it with the police department and get rid of the constitutional officers because of these things. And I'm glad you stand for and fight for, you know, the Second Amendment, and because it's important. I mean, we have to fight for it. Every day it's under assault. And the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. And
that's
obviously,
right.
And obviously the First Amendment, the part of the First Amendment that these mainstream media keep forgetting is peaceful protests.
That's right.
Peaceful protests. So talk to me about how you see the state of the country with this unrest and this anarchy and Antifa. Is Antifa real?
Absolutely. And you make a great point there. You know, our Constitution does protect our right to assembly, to expression, to speech, and peaceful protest. And there was no greater example of that than what we saw back in January in Richmond, where you had some 50,000 people, many of them heavily armed. It was a great display of power, if you will, you know, sending a message to the governor and the General Assembly that we will not be ruled by tyrants. But you had all this hardware on display, sort of all this artillery. It was really looked very impressive. Nobody was threatened. Nobody was assaulted. No property was destroyed. Nobody was attacked. Law enforcement was cheering us on. They were safely observing what was happening. We left the place better than we found it. They said it was cleaned up. We cleaned up after ourselves. That's peaceful protest. I also participated in the March for Life up in DC with some 500,000 people. That's a peaceful protest. The rioting, the violence, the attacks on innocent civilians, the attacks and really the killing of innocent civilians and police officers in our cities. You want to see Democrat policies on display. Look at the violence in our cities today under these Democrat governors, these Democrat mayors. That is not protected by the Constitution. And it's incredible that the same party that wants to allow that to happen and really not just tolerate it, but celebrate it, call it peaceful protest, also wants to defund our police. That's another great distinction between me and my opponent. And also wants to take away our Second Amendment rights to defend ourselves. What a combination.
Well, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness,
That's right? That's
and
right.
So where do you and you know, we do have a litmus test to the people that we give money to and support to, and the litmus test is real simple. Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice?
100% pro-life from conception, absolutely. My wife and I have lived that, meaning for years we have given thousands of dollars to the local crisis pregnancy center here in Blue Ridge Crisis Pregnancy Center, trying to help provide compassion, support, options for those who find themselves in difficult life situations, unplanned situations. We don't believe that the preciousness of life is compromised by the circumstances under which a child is conceived. And the number one role of government at the end of the day is to keep us safe and secure, not to protect us from ourselves, that's the Democrat way, but to protect us from foreign invasion on a federal level, to secure our borders on a federal level, law and order, public safety on a local level, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. And that begins with innocent, precious life. On the other hand, my opponent believes in abortion on demand without restriction for any reason up until the moment of birth, maybe even beyond, and that should be taxpayer funded. There's a reason why Planned Parenthood has endorsed him. And here he's a doctor, by the way, who knows better than I do. I'm a business guy, but knows the science of life. And here's a doctor who is extreme on abortion. I'm the pro-life candidate, unashamedly, unabashedly. I believe it. I would absolutely support the Life at Conception Act. That's Congress. The Republicans are trying to get to the floor. They can't get it there because we don't have a majority. Hopefully I can help them do that in January.
Oh, that's great. And you know, we also have a governor here, you know, another doctor who basically said when the baby's born, you know, we'll leave it up to the doctor to decide whether or not, you know, the baby should live.
Incredible.
You know, it's horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying.
Absolutely.
And you know, and I've read somewhere that you consider yourself a biblical conservative. Can you tell us what that means?
Yes, the media loves it when I say that. That's the number one. What does that mean, a biblical conservative? And and actually what I said, I'm a biblical, constitutional, economic conservative, broad-based conservative. Biblically in the sense that I believe the Judeo-Christian principles our nation was founded upon. It was men of faith, predominantly Christians, who established this nation. They believed the Constitution was a miracle, that they could come together and craft this divinely inspired document to establish this constitutional republic that we enjoy today, this sovereign republic that we have. And they sought divine intervention. And it was John Adams who said the Constitution was intended for a moral and religious people, and it's wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. And so I'm unashamed about my faith also on a personal level. It's my guiding principle. It's why I'm pro-life. It's why I'm pro-family. It's why I'm I believe so strongly in our religious liberties. And I get asked sometimes, well, if you're strong in your faith, how can you represent others who don't have the same faith? And I wonder if folks would ask that of somebody who was an avowed atheist or someone who believed in another faith like they do just because I happen to be a Christian. But the great thing about America and our Constitution is it protects us all to believe how we want to believe or not believe. It protects our ability to worship how we want to worship or not to worship. And that's what's great about America. Most nations of the world, as we know, forgive me, that's in my background there.
That's okay.
Most nations of the world, as we know, or many nations, I should say, do not tolerate freedom of religion. In other words, if you don't believe in the state religion, you suffer real persecution in many nations around the world, whether it's, or if it's a totalitarian communist state, you have no freedom to worship a religion. I don't believe the government has any constitutional authority as it comes to faith, religion, worship, church. It specifically says in the First Amendment shall make, we focus on the first one, the government shall make no laws establishing religion. Thank God for that. We don't want to have a state-sponsored religion. But it also says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Boy, have we seen that trampled on us this spring, this summer, as the government has trampled on the rights of churches and individuals to worship.
Well, not only that, I mean, you got a governor like Cuomo, who was again
Yes.
Shaming and trying to shut down, Jewish funerals.
Absolutely.
And and places where it's absolutely, they are absolutely coming after,
No
church going, Bible believing Christians
No question.
and people of faith, and the again, those people who constantly hear from the media that the separation of church and state. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say separation of church and state. As a matter of fact, it protects the government from interfering in faith, but it does not protect does not protect faith in churches from getting involved in government.
That's right. You're exactly right. We both know it's not in the Constitution. And exactly, any honest reading of the founders and the writings of the founders, the founding documents and the writings of our founders, any honest reading of that, it makes it clear they intended and sought, again, divine inspiration in what they did. They intended and sought religious influence on the decisions that they made. Exactly. The Constitution was intended to protect the church from the government, not to protect the government from the influence of religion. That's just a dishonest, revisionist history, as we know. They recognized they needed, all the principles of the Declaration of Independence, they were first spoken of in the churches. It was the pastors in the churches that led the revolution and were the inspiration for the revolution. And again, that was the dominant motivation of most of the founders were men of faith, most of them Christians.
Absolutely, 100%. So let's talk about education, because obviously our kids, they've gone through a great deal. They were pulled out of school last year in the state of Virginia. Everybody is distance learning, at least in my school, in my neighborhood, everyone is distance learning. And what's even worse is the first 2 days of school. I'll give you a personal story here. First 2 days of school, the principal got on and talked for the first few minutes to the students, all the students, via live stream like this. And of course, you would expect the principal of the school, after this terrible situation with COVID and having to do distance learning, whether or not we should or not is a question that I'm going to ask you in a few. But they put them in this position to have to stay home in their room at their desk, looking at a screen all day. And instead of saying, I apologize that you guys are going through this. We're going to make the best of it. We're all going to try, pumping the students up, which was kind of what I expected the principal to do.
Little empathy.
No. The first 2 days of school, he spent at least 15 to 20 minutes talking to the students about white privilege and about how we all have to check our white privilege, and he won't tolerate any racism, and didn't encourage a student at all, didn't say anything about this teaching, just pitched this critical race theory. And it's a real problem in Virginia now, because they are pushing this critical race. There was also in the I believe they just tried to pass a rule that would prohibit teachers from saying anything negative against their critical race theory indoctrination.
Wow.
And so, we have a real problem in education now, because education,
Absolutely.
Just like the mainstream media, just like Hollywood, just like sports, is now nothing but indoctrination and propaganda.
That's exactly right.
So as a member of Congress, what will you do to fix that?
Well, I think you make a wonderful point, and I think the number one threat to the future of our country, and really what's impacting us so negatively today, it's hard to say that because there's so many things, but certainly the education system. When you have 40, 50 hours a week, our kids are subjected to this worldview, this indoctrination, as you know, where they've gotten so far afield, so far away from sort of the reading, writing, arithmetic thing, and what the things that we're spending our time and our tax dollars to put into our kids' heads and minds. I think it begins with, I would like to eliminate the Department of Education. And I know that's a tall order. You got to get a majority to do that, majority of Republicans to go along with you to do that. But to fight in the interim to diminish the federal role in education. It's bad enough here in Virginia to have Richmond, especially with the leadership we have in Richmond now, telling us in your county, I think you said Loudoun County, in my county, Campbell County, telling us how to run our schools and what the curriculum needs to look like and what those standards are. That's bad enough to have it coming out of Richmond, but at least we have more influence over Richmond than we do over DC as citizens. But I believe in supporting homeschool families and private school families, and something we don't have here in Virginia, school choice. That we ought to have education savings accounts like they do in some states, where the parents are able to put the dollars towards, instead of going to the tax. If they pull their kids out of the government schools, the public schools, then they can use some of those dollars towards, homeschooling or private schooling. And I believe in charter schools are good because that's put parents in charge. But the more that we can do to put parents in charge and control as the primary driver, if you will, of their kids' education. A family ought to be able to pull their kid out of a school for whatever reason and put it in another public school without any consequence, penalty, or what have you. For whatever reason, they think that's a better choice for their child. We don't have that here in Virginia. And frankly, the Democrat Party, as we know, especially the elitists who put their kids in private school, and many of which went to private school themselves, don't want to allow school choice. They want to keep kids in failing public schools, and it really impacts the minority community, the urban community even more. And to your point about the current status, isn't learning essential? Isn't teaching essential? Kids are at such fractional risk here with this pandemic. And then the greater consequence of let's call it the cure, the reaction, if you will, what we're doing to keep them out of school last spring, to keep them out of school this fall, the developmental delay, the social delay, the not being able to participate in extracurricular activities, which is as enriching in their lives as even the academics are, the academic delay of that. And who does that hurt most? The kids on IEPs. We have 3 children, one of which was on an IEP for a long time. I just can't imagine what that would have been like. Our kids are grown now. If he had been in that situation and wasn't able to be in school and had put him behind, and not everybody has access to reliable broadband in the rural communities or in the urban centers. Not everybody has a strong parental structure around them that can help them. Not every parent's able to be at home. What a tragedy what we're allowing to happen. And for what? In terms of the risk. It's not really diminishing the risk for the kids anyway. The risk is minimal, fractional, as we know. We've learned that now, and it's really a travesty that we're not letting the kids be in school.
So why aren't they? What are the politicians looking to gain, in your opinion?
Well, it's hard not to conclude, if you will, that there's political motivation here. Because I think let's just rewind for a moment. Let's say we're sitting here back in January, so some 10 months, 9-10 months ago, and we told people, listen, there is a health crisis that's going to come, and some 2% of the population is going to contract this virus. 0.06% are going to succumb to the virus. And we know every death is too many, and every death is sad, and every death is tragic. But literally, 0.06% would succumb to it. 2% would be infected by it, if you will. Many of those asymptomatic, as we know, are very minor cases. Of the 0.06%, that's what 200,000 would equate to out of 330 million. 94% of those deaths were through other contributing factors, other comorbidities where they had some issues. Doesn't make the death any less tragic, but it means that there was other issues that might have led to it anyway. Now, we're going to try to reduce that, try to reduce that by shutting down schools, shutting down jobs, shutting down the workplace, shutting down sports, shutting down everything. We're going to shut it down because that might reduce it. Somewhat. How significantly is debatable. The consequence is going to be businesses bankrupted, jobs lost, people unemployed, people falling behind in their mortgage, their rent, their car payments, kids pulled out of school, kids falling behind, not getting to participate in the things that you love, not getting to visit your loved ones in assisted living facilities, not getting to get necessary surgeries and other care done, not getting to go to the dentist, not going to get your hair taken care of, just unless you're Nancy Pelosi. But all these kind of things are going to happen. This is the real absolute consequence, because this might diminish the other. I wonder what most Americans would have chosen, because now, as we've learned, who's at greater risk and what kind of precautions make some difference, and but to continue it now, and I don't fault those going backwards. You'd make the best decision that you can at the time with the information that you have, but now we've learned who's at greater risk. The therapeutics have caught up. Testing is way up. We're testing 5 or 6 million people a week. So, of course, positive tests are up. But again, many of those are asymptomatic or very minor, very modest, things that people wouldn't even know they had something if they hadn't been tested. They think they just had a cold or what have you. And deaths, thankfully, as a percentage, are going down. That we don't get that talked about a whole lot in the media, but thank God for that. So it's hard to imagine, to your point, to your question, that there's not a political motivation for some to perpetuate the fear, at least past the election. And then what's particularly scary to me is when we have allowed our constitutional rights to be trampled, and we've allowed this government by a fiat, by press conference, these executive orders that the founders didn't intend. Here in Virginia is a great example of that, of course, as we know. What happens when the next health crisis comes? Are we going to repeat this and claim, oh, look what we did to make it less impactful, so we just need to continue this policy? You wonder if we'll go back to normal, if you will. So it's hard to separate the political motivation from the folks that seem to want to overcorrect and overreact and continue these practices.
You're absolutely right. Look, I feel the same exact way. Our kids should be in school. Businesses should be allowed to be open and treat, and personally, I believe we need to treat every citizen as an adult. You mentioned earlier, the fact that that the founders trusted the citizens to arm themselves, and today we don't trust the citizens to cover our mouth when we sneeze.
That's right.
And so we have to mandate masks and mandate social distancing. And I'm sorry, I'm a grown. I've never seen somebody open mouth sneeze as an adult.
Yeah,
and open mouth. You cover your mouth. You could even go into the elbow if you want. That's going to do the same thing as a mask. So how do you feel about mask mandates?
I'm against mandates like that. I'm against a vaccine mandate. I'm against a mask mandate. I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV. My opponent, he's Captain COVID. He's made being a doctor the sort of the foundation of his campaign. And I like to say, hey, we don't need another doctor in Virginia politics. We've got one in Richmond who I think many of us are very disappointed with. And again, I don't diminish the threat of the virus. And again, we've lost a lot of people. And even if you had a contributing factor, but you passed away, obviously that's tragic and it's sad. But I'll give an example on overcorrection. We lose about 40,000 people a year to car accidents in the country, about 40,000 a year. We don't take the attitude of, we have got to vaccinate this. We've got to absolutely eliminate this and lower the speed limit to 5 miles an hour, or do what probably some Democrats would like to do, which is eliminate all vehicular traffic. Maybe that'll happen when they would go to electric vehicles mandate. But we realize that in a free society, there is some risk, and we're willing to tolerate some risk. We try to mitigate it. We have speed limits. We wear seat belts. We don't drive impaired, and try not to drive distracted. And hopefully we're being careful and safe, but there's risk there, and we choose that risk in a free, constitutional free society. We don't want to live in a totalitarian closed state, and so I have had doctors tell me, and again, this is not me saying this. I'm repeating what I've been told. I have had more than one doctor tell me that wearing a mask for this virus is like putting up a chain link fence to keep out mosquitoes. and they've said that the airborne particles are way too small. You can't keep them out. And whether it was when they first came out and said don't wear masks, Fauci and the others said don't wear a mask, they don't help. They said decades of studies showed that it doesn't help with the virus. It may even make it worse. I don't know the science of that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified. I am saying what others have said. And I do think there's controversy or disagreement in the science of it, but I certainly don't believe in the mandate, like you said. I think that, in my life, in my experience, most people practice social distance anyway. Most of us, like you said, we don't get in one another's face. We wash our hands. We use hand sanitizer. We do those kind of things. The things that you're seeing mandated when people are outside, you'll see people in some of these cities, they're outside running, exercising by themselves, and they've got a mask on. Who are they protecting there? And that's not, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to say it's not healthy. It doesn't sound healthy.
No, absolutely not. It is virtue signaling is really what it is. But so moving on to a couple questions. If you're elected, and when you're elected to the United States House of Representatives, one of the most important votes that you can take is whether or not you send our men and women to war. Mm-hmm. And a lot has been made over the last couple of decades in terms of this authorization, the use of force, basically giving in my opinion, abdicating Congress's responsibility to the president. Would you vote to continue the authorization of use of force? Would you ask to declare war if we're going to send our men and women into harm's way? And under what circumstances would you do that? And also, do you support the Patriot Act?
Let me do the last one first, because that's a quick and simple one. Absolutely not on the Patriot Act. Would not have voted to reauthorize it. I believe it compromises is against our 4th and 5th constitutional rights, 4th, 5th, 9th Amendment. Very much against the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, I think, well-intended in a reaction. And that's the danger, though. That's the danger. If the Democrats get power here, and there's an emotional situation and they'll strip away our gun rights. We have a pandemic in an emotional situation. They trample constitutional rights here. And the Patriot Act, I think, well-intended in reaction to 9/11. President Bush did a great job keeping our nation safe. The nation was unified for a while, but it has not been demonstrated that the Patriot Act, because of surveillance, frankly, unconstitutional surveillance of U.S. citizens, has diminished the terrorist threat. It has diminished, or it has reduced criminality. But again, in a free society, we don't believe in that. We don't want to give up our constitutional rights to reduce crime. There's things that we could do and trample the Constitution to shut down on crime and live in like some other places in the world do that. We don't want to do that in our constitutional republic. So absolutely would not have voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act, and have great concerns for Republicans who did. I expect the Democrat Party to do that. Although you had a few Democrats that are strong on liberty, if you will, that voted against it also. So that's the easy one quickly on that. To the other point, I'm a big supporter of our president. I think he's the best president of my lifetime. I stand with him on just about everything that he's done. I certainly going to do everything I can to help him get reelected. I want to work with him in D.C. and help advance his second term agenda. But the Constitution, I think intentionally, all of it intentionally, but it's relevant, I should say, that the first article dealt with the legislative branch. The largest part of the Constitution, as it applies to 3 branches, emphasized the powers of the legislative branch. And really, it's supposed to be the strongest dominant branch, if you will, because it's the branch that's closest to the people. You and I don't have a lot of influence over whether or not who the president appointed. I'm thankful for Amy Coney Barrett, or if the Senate confirms that. I believe that they will. I certainly trust and hope they will. But we don't have a lot of influence over the court. Very little, of course. And we have less influence as being one voter in the whole country for the presidency. We have more influence over the legislative branch. And that's why the founders intended that to be the most powerful branch, the branch that was most accountable to the people. And sadly, what we've seen, I don't blame the current administration or even the current Congress, it's the trend that's happened, and it's just been perpetuated, where Congress has not asserted itself to the full extent of its constitutional power and has ceded too much power to the executive branch. The executive branch has grown in power through the bureaucracies, the unaccountable bureaucrats who are not elected in these agencies, of course, but also, yes, to your point, your question, I think Congress needs to reassert itself as the body that's intended to declare war or not to declare war. And while we want the president to be able to be, and I think that's clear in the Constitution, to be able to be nimble, to respond quickly in times of sort of emergency or quick strike things that are, and there's tension, of course, when you get to defense and military between conservatives, because you got the hawkish that want to be tough and want to, to stand strong. And then you got those who are a little more concerned, of course, on the, direct national security interest and not put troops in harm's way unless that's justified. And frankly, I have evolved, if you will, where I was probably a little more hawkish, 10, 20, 30 years ago as a young conservative than I am now. I have moved to the point where, yes, I lean more towards that Congress needs to assert that role, that we need to dial back what the executive branch is doing in that. And I do. And what happens, as you know, the president takes the action without consulting. We may consult, but without getting congressional approval. And then the Congress snipes and attacks and criticizes, but Congress doesn't want the responsibility themselves. And it's almost as if they're willing to let the president do it so they don't have the responsibility, and they can second guess Monday morning quarterback, change down the road on they were for it before they were against it. And so, yes, I think the Congress needs to assume that. And then to your other point on when, I like the president's philosophy on that. It's when there's a direct national security interest. And when we do that, it needs to diminish that direct national security interest. I think where we got messed up in Iraq, for example, was we should have diminished the threat to the United States that did exist, and to some extent that we believed existed, and some of which ended up not being necessarily justified or demonstrated on what we found or didn't find. But we did. But this nation building, this occupation, you cannot. Not only is it not our responsibility, but you cannot establish a nation like ours when there's no respect for the rule of law, there's no respect for life, and you don't have the foundational principles upon which this unique nation was founded. We can't establish that easily anyplace else.
Absolutely right. And I'm 100% with you. I think the president does have the authority in surgical cases to protect the country. Matter of fact, not the authority, but the responsibility.
Yes.
But in terms of declaring war, it is up to Congress. And I truly appreciate that answer. So the other important vote that you can have is when we win back the House, because I believe that we're going to. Take the House out of Nancy Pelosi's hands, and quite frankly, who has abused her office terribly, impeaching the president on baseless grounds, basically as a distraction to keep Joe Biden from being accused of the same crimes they accused Trump of, and basically spending 4 years on the Russia collusion hoax, which everybody knew was garbage.
Right.
But one of the most important things you could do when you first get into power is elect a Speaker of the House. So who would you vote for? Who would your perfect candidate be as Speaker of the House?
Let me comment just, if I may, before I lead to that, on what you just said. What the Dems have done, what Pelosi has done, as we both know, is really, it's almost treasonous, because it's trying to undermine the will of the people. They couldn't beat Trump at the ballot box, and the people exercised their right and chose him as president. And so they said, hey, we're going to undo that. They started trying to do that from the moment he got elected, before he even got inaugurated. They're threatening to do it again. If we don't win back the House and President Trump prevails, and the Democrats hold on to the House, they've threatened they're already going to start to impeach him again. What a travesty! What a disgrace! What a disgrace of democracy! What an attack on the foundation of what our government is supposed to be. That if they don't like Trump, then try to keep his replacement, Pence or whomever, from becoming president 4 years from now if they can't beat him on November 3rd. Hopefully they will not be able to. As it applies to the Speaker, Lord willing, like you said, hopefully we're going to take back the House and we're going to be in that position to select the Speaker. And I've been asked that a few times. Certainly, I will be one of those conservatives leaders. I will be a bold conservative with conviction. I'm not a quiet conservative. I expect to join the Freedom Caucus. I certainly intend to do that. And I'll be aligned with those conservative patriots who are trying to lead the debate, lead the discussion, try to hold Republicans to the principles that we say we believe in. I'm not going there to compromise with the Democrats. I'm going there to defeat their worldview, to defeat the direction they're trying to take our country, to stand up for what we believe in. I believe Republicans when we stand bold and strong on principle. We don't apologize for being in power. We don't cave and wring our hands and worry about overreaching. We do what we were elected to do and give people a reason to vote for us. So that said, that's the kind of Republican that I will be. I don't want to speculate on who I would vote for because we can probably guess on at least who one of the candidates will be. And frankly, that said, I suspect that if the president wins, which is going to be critical. We're not going to win the House back if he doesn't win. But if the president wins and then we win the House, there's going to be a great sense of unity and enthusiasm. And I think I'm just guessing. I've not been there yet. I'm going to guess you're going to see a pretty unified Republican caucus. And you may not see the I don't want to say the division. That sounds like a negative thing. But the challenges, if you will, like you might if we lost the presidency and we lost the House, then you probably see a little bit more wrangling there for who needs to lead the party in what direction.
I appreciate that answer. I especially like the fact that you said we're going there to defeat the Democrats' worldview, because that is what we're there to do. We're not there to compromise and get things done. Getting things done got us in this position in the first place. We can't get things done. We are there to preserve the Constitution, to protect the Constitution, and defeat the Democrats' attempts at trying to light it on fire.
Could I jump in on that for a second? I'm sorry, but you're exactly right. Gridlock is not necessarily a bad thing. Most of what government does to us while pretending to do things for us is bad. Yeah. And the founders intended that it would be deliberative and it would be difficult. And we rush through these bills that we don't read, that have multiple issues where something you like is packed in with something you don't like, or vice versa. Oh, we got to do something. No, we don't always have to do something. And as a conservative, sometimes I get challenged a little bit with that because I'll get people in the district saying, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to bring home? How are you going to bring? And I'm like, I'm not that guy who's going there to say, hey, I'm going to bring this home to you. I'm going to deliver this to you. I'm going to spend this, because I believe less government is more. And you're exactly right. Government should be slow, do no harm first, stop spending money, stop doing bad stuff. And certainly I want to see a conservative majority across the board so we can, but a lot of what we want to do is to roll back, to reduce taxes, to reduce regulations, to give more freedom, rather than to pass more legislation that takes control of our lives.
Right. So you're in a race. Right. You're in a race. Cameron Webb is your opponent. And he has raised, at least as of 6:30, I'm sure it's a lot more. I don't know if the new numbers came out yet, but he's raised $1.4 million to your $261,000. And let me say, $261,000 for a challenger is a lot of money. An incumbent, they once you win office, and you'll see this, even a conservative member of Congress, people will start writing you unsolicited checks, and they'll solicit you later for what they want, but you'll get lots of checks from everybody. So it's easy to stuff your coffers when you're an incumbent. But raising just about $300,000 is, by June 30th is quite an accomplishment. But how do you plan to compete against the money that the incumbent has?
Great question, but let me provide a little bit of context of that 261 number, whatever it was. We didn't get the nomination until June 13, and then the report you saw was June 30. Coming into June 13, we were fighting to win a convention. That's how we were nominated. We were fighting against an incumbent who was outspending us almost 10-1, and we were truly practicing, convention, you are recruiting delegates. It is retail politics at its finest. It's representative democracy at its finest. And we were able to register the largest number of delegates in the history of the 5th District through retail politics. It wasn't about mailers or spending. It was about retail. My opponent ran again, he outspent us almost 10-1, and we got 60% of the vote on June 13. It was supposed to be April 25, which would have gave me 60 days to raise money before that June 30. Instead, it was postponed because of COVID till June 13. But we only raised $186,000 because that's all we needed to win the convention. We weren't focused on fundraising. We were focused on events and meeting people and recruiting delegates, and we overwhelmingly defeated my opponent, who spent about $1.5 million trying to beat me, the incumbent. So we only had a short window of time. When my opponent became the Democrat nominee on June 23, the money just poured in, as it does from Act Blue, the billionaire class, the Hollywood elites outside the district. So his number was really impressive, 1.3 to our 261. I think you're going to see from him probably a really strong, robust number since that time. Almost all of them outside Virginia, almost all of them outside the district. He was on TV for the first 2 months of the general race in July and August, almost unchallenged by us because we didn't have enough to get on TV. We had to really build the fundraising game. But what you're going to see with the report that's getting ready to come out, the books close on September 30, as you know, a much stronger number. We've raised about $900,000 since we became the nominee now. So we're going to be competitive. We've raised now from that 260s about 1.1 million now total. So we've done well. It's not enough. We need to do more, but we're on TV. We're running ads. We've got some help from the party. We've got some help from some outside folks. So we're going to have what we need to be competitive. We're going to have a minimum of a couple $2 million to spend on the race. Now I suspect he's going to have $4 or $5 million. But they outspent us in 18. They outspent us in 16. They're going to outspend us again. We just got to be competitive to expose who he is, and we'll win this race.
Yeah, let me acknowledge my mistake. You beat the Republican incumbent.
We did.
In the
who voted for the Patriot Act, by the way.
Oh, that is
just as an example.
That's a very good reason why he's not there. And now you're going against a Democrat. But so so what are you doing? What kind of campaign activities are you doing now? Are you like Joe Biden, hiding out in your basement, or are you knocking on doors? What is your opponent doing?
The great news on our side is, people ask me all the time, how has the pandemic impacted? It really hasn't. We're getting great crowds, great turnout. We're doing 3 or 4 events a day. And our side, frankly, again, they're trying to be smart and to be careful, but they're not overreacting to the crisis. And we've got great turnout. And I think that's one of our advantages. We meet with hundreds of people every week. We really feel like we're hitting our momentum, certainly on the fundraising side, certainly on the event attendance side, certainly on the enthusiasm side. If you travel around the district, the signs that are up, I know signs don't vote, but they're an indicator. Our messaging, our strategy, the fact that we're on TV, using our, one of the big issues come up in the campaign is my opponent is for defunding the police, which he denied once he became the nominee. He ran hard left radical to get the nomination. There's a reason why before this June 23rd convention, he was endorsed by the Squad, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, because he's the most radical. He'd marched with BLM, he'd knelt with BLM, he'd reposted their messaging about no justice, no peace, and all that sort of thing. But then as soon as he became the nominee, all of a sudden he's a bipartisan moderate who wants to work across the aisle and doesn't stand for anything anymore. So for a couple of months, he got to hit us hard on TV with smears and attack ads and dishonest accusations and all that, and present himself in a sort of a positive image that he's going to heal, he's going to save us from COVID and all that. Well, now we're on TV hitting him back, exposing who he is, using his own words. We got recording with his own words calling for defunding the police, and we're showing the images of the things that he's done and the violence in the cities that he has supported and his true radical positions. So we're confident, taking nothing for granted, fighting for every vote. We're confident we're going to prevail on November 3rd.
I'm confident as well. Again, it's a R+6 district, so that and that's important. But quite frankly, we can't take anything for granted.
No.
And Trump is where I am is popular, but nobody talks about it. I'm probably one of my only neighbors that have a Trump sign and a Gade sign and an Alicia Andrews sign in my yard. If I was in your district, I'd have a Bob Good sign there. But in your district, what are you seeing? Does Trump have a shot to win Virginia?
I believe he does. If you look at 4 years ago, in 8 and 12, when Obama won in 2008, I'm sure you know this, but for anyone else watching, we had not lost this seat, or this state rather, since 1964 LBJ. So 44 years. But when Obama won it in 8 and 12, I mean, it was almost like the polls have closed in Virginia. We're calling it for Obama. It was quick and decisive. With Trump, as you know, we were up late into the night trying to figure out when he was going to carry Virginia. And a lot of us, that's what gave us hope. He may win this election because Virginia was in play for so long. Ed Gillespie almost beat Warner. He lost by, I think it was 0.5% 6 years ago, which gives me hope for Daniel Gade. But I do believe Virginia's in play for the president. Certainly in the 5th district, like you said, you see tons of Trump signs. We see him all over the place. He's popular in this district. He won it by 11 points last time. I believe he's going to do really well this time. That's going to help us. A friend of mine is the leader of Virginians for Trump, and he drives the big blue Trump bus all over the district and all over the state. And what he does is he sells Trump paraphernalia, if you will, out of that bus. And he says the enthusiasm today is much greater, much intense, much more widespread than what he saw in 2016. That's what we're feeling too in this part of the state where we are. So we think he's going to do really well in the district. I think he's got a shot here in Virginia. I certainly hope and pray, going to do everything we can to help him in the 5th district. We need to run up the numbers here for him to help him in the rest of the state.
Well, that's awesome. And look, you're going to have our support. You've passed our test with flying colors. It was a fantastic interview, and I appreciate your constitutional positions, and not only that, but I recommend everyone who's listening to go and contribute. If you've got cash, even $5, whatever it is, contribute to Bob's race. If you're in the district, if you're out of the district, if you're in Virginia, you're out of Virginia, contribute to Bob's race. We need to win this seat. We need to win the state of Virginia, because it's important. If we win Virginia, Trump easily wins the presidency.
That's exactly right.
And quite frankly, the experiment of a blue Virginia has gone terribly awry.
Awful.
If you're living here, they've turned a great state into a California. Pretty much.
That's right. That's right.
And so we definitely need to get this great state back. And I appreciate everything that you're doing and going through. I know running for office is not easy, and I appreciate you leaving the private sector to come and do this. And it's a mission for you. I can tell that.
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
And so go and contribute to Bob's site. What's your website?
Thank you, Larry. It's bobgoodforcongress.com. Good has no E, just Bob Good, FOR, Congress.com. But we appreciate everyone who will help us.
Absolutely. And you can also go to constitutionalrightspac.com. You'll be an endorsed candidate on our page, and you'll be able to watch this video. And next to it, you can contribute on Constitutional Rights PAC to your campaign. And what we're going to do for you is every dollar that comes in will go to you, including the credit card fees. So even the 2 to 3% that the credit card takes, we're going to pay that for you. We're going to send 100% of that contribution, and you're also going to get a check from the PAC directly.
Terrific. So, thank you, Larry. Appreciate it very much. It's great to be with you, and thanks for what you all do. It's important for the country, and you get it. You're part of the solution. We're glad to be in the fight with you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Bob.
Thank you. God bless, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Constitutional Rights PAC is responsible for the content of this message.